Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SIG Windows meetup. Thank you guys all for attending. We had cubing on last week, so I canceled the meeting. Hopefully, nobody tried to join us and couldn't find anybody online. And it was actually awesome to see a lot of you guys also in person at KubeCon. So Patrick, Deep, Robert, Ben, Leah, and a few others. So thank you guys all for showing up. Some of you guys were there for Patrick's session, and I'll let him share some of the details. And some of you guys were there for the joint session that me and Patrick did. Overall, at least for our joint session, we had about 40 or so folks. We see a lot of interest on Windows, obviously reinforcing our efforts that we've been putting on this SIG. And we solicited also some help here and there to help us as we're moving towards GA. Patrick, you want to talk a little about your session?
Yeah. So I put a link to the source code I used in the notes there. My session went pretty well. Basically, Jessica Dean, who's one of the cloud developer advocates at Microsoft, and I put together a couple of different things. But what was interesting in this session was this is the first time I had tried using a new service that's designed for delivering classroom labs. And so I had a whole bunch of VMs pre-configured with Kube Control, Visual Studio, and all of that stuff there. The scripts I used to actually set those VMs up are in that same repo if you need them. But it was nice because I had a whole bunch of people get their hands dirty trying Kubernetes out on Windows. And so I had everybody first deploy something based off of an image that already pushed to Docker Hub. That was using an ASP.NET web service and Microsoft SQL Server on Linux backend. So that way people could see how node selectors worked and all of that. And then the second thing I did was showed a prototype using Draft that would basically let you create a .NET core application from the command line. They've got something that can create template code really, really easy. And then I use Draft, which is the tool that will automatically create you a Docker file and Helm chart. So then you can just run Draft up and it will deploy. And so we had that work on the same cluster. And as far as I could tell, everybody that tried it out got it working. So so that was very good. There were a few tiny problems with the cluster that I think we've got an idea of what happened now, because some of the nodes were patched and rebooted. And so I think that we've got a race condition where one of the services doesn't come up right for the Azure networking, which breaks stuff. So I'm working on validating that because I don't know if anybody noticed, but I was presenting on Patch Tuesday. So that could have been part of the problem. That's my excuse either way. So I thought that went pretty good. And then so that was on Tuesday, and then Wednesday we had the SIG Windows general session, and that was one where Michael and I gave an update. Did you want to talk more about that?
No, I think besides the fact that we gave everybody an update of where we are and kind of answer some questions and try to gauge interest from folks in terms of different things that were important to them. I think at the very least, the most important thing is we need to actually deliver this to GA. Like, people need to get their hands on. There was sincere interest of having so many Windows workloads out there and having to have an orchestra like Kubernetes to place them on is super important to them. Obviously, a lot of the interest is coming from IT operators and IT admins. Not all of those guys can code, so the contributions they can make to our SIG are not huge. But the fact that they're interested in this is giving us the customer voice to help us go and get this approved for GA. I think couple of the only features that we're going to do moving forward before GA, if we have the time, is what Deep is working on with Jeremy on group managed service accounts. Potentially, we can look into some other small enhancements here and there. But the very fact of the matter remains that we need to get our tests in order, and we need to get the KEB approved. And I know that Ben and Leah have started the KEB blueprint. So I will contribute to that as well, and we'll get it ready so that as soon as the holidays are over, we go in front of all the different SIGs and get them to approve this.
Okay, where's that blueprint at? Is that the one that was started on HackMD?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I linked it in the doc for this meeting.
Oh, okay, I see it.
We had it on a thread as well with Brian Grant.
Okay, good.
I remember that thread.
So I talked to Aaron about this process briefly, and basically he was in favor of getting.
Which person did you talk to? Sorry.
Sorry, I talked to Aaron Krickenberger, who's the release lead for version 14.
Okay.
And his view was that we could basically get a KEP merged as a draft on GitHub with more or less just like a title and summary of what it is, and then keep iterating there. So I'm okay using HackMD or either way. But one thing I'd like to do is when it comes to the list of the test cases, the new KEP layout actually has a directory. And so I'd like to be able to put the test case list in a separate markdown file. Yeah. So that way I could basically copy and paste the results from a test dry run. So that way we can start with all the test case names in there, and it'll be a little bit easier to do a diff.
Yeah, we can definitely do that for the test cases, but for the main functionality and some of the documentation, we can just keep it, a little bit separate.
Okay.
So I talked to a few folks while we were at KubeCon as well. I know a couple more people in the release, like Kenny Coleman. That's also going to take a more active role. I think he's taking over Tim Pepper's responsibilities in that aspect. And they're putting our chances of going GA 114 somewhere around 50%. And the reason is the following. They're saying that, remember, Patrick, you and I had this discussion right after they denied us, saying that once we are approved and we go GA, then every time a new SIG comes in with a new feature, let's say SIG node, we're going to be approvers on their KEP, and we're going to say, have you tested it on Windows? Because we probably won't have the bandwidth. And that's going to create a double-edged sword where those guys are going to be gated on doing more things on Windows, which certain SIGs, I'm not sure how much they hold that in high regard or not. So the flipping that aside, do all of the SIGs have the capability to invest some time in understanding what we so proposing for Windows with 114 and approving it and putting it into their schedule? That's kind of in the 50-50 balance, and that's where that will they approve us or not comes in. Now, we did get some political capital by going to war with them like a few weeks ago and losing. So there's some chips that you can cash, but the ultimate thing comes that they would deny us now, but later on we'll have that veto power on new features that they're bringing in, if they test them on Windows or not. And being a small SIG that we are, we won't have the option to do the testing on ourselves. They have to do it. So that's a very interesting thing to consider. But my general feeling is nothing's going to happen in the last 2 weeks of this year. So it's our responsibility to basically modify the KEP and get it in a good state. So we all agree within the SIG that this is all the info that we want to put in it, and then from there on go in at the beginning of the year and go to SIG cluster lifecycle, SIG architecture, SIG release, and start SIG node and getting every one of them to view the KEP and agree to it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. On a related note there, I also sent my summary after the conformance working group meeting to the Google group, and I have that linked in the notes there too. So, but the key point there is that they still are very interested in seeing the results for the Windows tests, and so the fact that we have test grid up and running is great. Now we've got to make sure that we continue adding more tests to that and get that consistently green. And conformance is not required for Windows to GA. That's something that will go in parallel.
Yeah, that's really good that the conformance was pushed out. Even one more release out now, right? Initially, they pushed it out of 113. Now it's pushed out of 114 as well. So that's good. Do we have any statistics on how many tests are passing right now that should be passing on Windows, or how many are not passing when they should not be passing?
So out of the ones that were aware, well, do you want to speak to this, Adelina?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
yes.
We can hear you, Adelina.
Awesome. Yeah, so let me just pull up what we have. So this is for Windows Server 1803. So I have this list. So we should be passing 159 tests. Those should be the ones that should run and pass on Windows.
So 159 tests should be passing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be run and passing. So if we go here, so this is the latest I have. So there are 159 should run, and we skipped 67. This is on 1803.
Skip 67 and saying 67 did not pass.
No, they're skipped. They will never run. And then out of those, so on test grid, basically we have this we have some flakes, as you can see, if you look on test grid. The only test that's there but doesn't seem to work is that first one, the guestbook application. Now that runs and works perfectly in 2019. It doesn't, however, anymore on 1803. That's because it's related to a DNS issue. That happens on 1803. So my understanding is that it's related to the same issue that prevents the DNS test to run. Is that right, Claudio? I don't think he can hear us.
Oh, I can hear you.
So the only one from this group that is problematic, as I said, is the guestbook one.
Yeah, so that's failing because of some DNS issues on 1803. It's not able to resolve some services using DNS.
And Patrick, I know you mentioned you're going to switch to 1809 or 719 at some point. I guess that hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, the stuff on test grid hasn't moved to 2019 yet.
Okay. I'm wondering if the DNS issues will be fixed by that or not.
They will. So that I can confirm. 2019 are on test, or on the test we ran separate from this test grid. The ones DNS works.
Okay, so Adelina, just so that I'm clear, so 159 tests are applicable to Windows, 67 tests are being skipped because they're not applicable to Windows.
Yeah.
We're seeing some guestbook issues and some DNS failures. So out of the 159 tests that are applicable to Windows, so before we go GA, we need to be able to say there's 159 tests that are going to be tagged as Windows based on the conformance email that, based on the email that Patrick posted on our SIG group. How many of them aren't passing today, green, consistently?
So the only consistent one that's not green is guestbook on 1803.
So 158 tests pass and one does not pass only?
On 1803, yeah. The rest of them, they do have flakes, so don't get me wrong, they do have flakes, but not that much. And I'm imagining 2019 will solve most of this.
So are some of those flakes due to some of the timeouts? I think Patrick alluded to some timeouts in the past that need to be increased a little bit on Windows. Are those?
Yeah. So basically what's happening is that we cannot increase the timeout. It's hard-coded in the framework. So they have a 5-minute hard timeout. We cannot change that.
Can we preload all the images on all the nodes? Like if you know your...
Yeah, we did that.
And we still hit timeouts, even if after we preload?
We still hit some issues on some of them, but it's way better. This one, again, I'm expecting 2019 to increase increase the pass rate because of fixes in Windows itself. That's what I see on the test run. Now the switch, we're trying to so basically we're trying to add a quick fix in the tool we use to deploy in ACS Engine, so that we can consistently bring up 2019 clusters.
Okay.
So there's basically a small bug that prevents 100% up rate for clusters.
Okay. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens with Server 19 then, if we can eliminate some of the flakes and the timeouts, and then we can get that test running. So Patrick, I guess once we do that, then we'll be ready to kind of declare the testing part to be ready for you to start the documentation aspect of it.
Well, so I was going to start from the list of test cases that we expect to be green first, but I think one of the other points that we need to look at is, so that's just based off of the conformance tests, which was the original strategy that we had talked about for testing Windows. The current concerns are more about the overall quality for Windows, and so I think that once we review this list of test cases plus what's skipped, there are probably some gaps that we need to fill with Windows-specific test cases. Yes. So I think it's going to be this plus some.
So it will be this 159 plus whatever else we find as gaps.
Yeah. But those are ones that we get to define and just tag. We don't have to really have. We shouldn't have to have anybody else review them, because we should be able to just check them into the Windows testing folder.
Are there really only 226 tests in the test matrix for Kubernetes? That's it? Nothing else?
No, that's just the conformance tests.
Okay, just conformance tests.
It's in several hundred, if not 1,000 test cases.
Actually, the whole count is 2,000 and something, but they're divided by, so a lot of them are for providers. A lot of them are for GT.
Okay, so those are completely not applicable to us. So only conformance tests are applicable to us then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we think any of these test cases are insufficient, we shouldn't hesitate to go ahead and create another one.
Like I guess for Deep and Jeremy, as you guys are working on the group managed service accounts, one of the biggest things to add is we need to make sure that we add proper allocate test cases that we need to add for the conformance test for this.
Right. Agreed. Well.
That's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, so bit. So do you think there needs to be a conformance test for that? Because I was thinking that'll be more like an end-to-end test, like a regular end-to-end test around authority, around authentication, I guess, or auth overall, as opposed to like Windows conformance.
I mean, we would mark it as a Windows feature test. It would not necessarily be a conformance test.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if the way we'd probably want to run that is either running it in a separate cluster and then uploading the results directly to test grid, because we can create new categories over there under SIG Windows, So if we wanted to have one for like optional Windows tests, we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
The other potential alternative would be to create a Windows domain controller in the same account that we're running these tests today.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit hesitant to do that because that's the account we're using for upstream testing, and we want to restrict the number of people that can do it. Because if you're going to run tests requiring an Active Directory domain, we're going to need a group of people on call to support those if we want them to be release blocking. And so my preference would be we run those on a less frequent basis and make sure that the SIG is responsible for checking those test results and raising issues during the alpha and beta releases and getting those fixed early rather than putting them immediately into the release blocking criteria.
Yeah. Makes sense.
All right. Well, let's see what else is on our agenda. So
no meeting next week, I'm assuming.
Yeah, no meeting for next week and Christmas. So we have 2 weeks off. The unfortunate part of New Year's and Christmas hitting on Tuesday. So we did the test update. We talked about the CAP, the GA and conformance. Patrick, kind of, do you want to elaborate anything more on that, or people can read the email? I think that has all the info they will need.
Yeah, I would say read the email. If there's any questions about it, raise it there. We already talked about the key points. So.
And then, do you want to talk a little bit more about this AKS engine update?
Oh, yeah. So the code that I've been working on to deploy Kubernetes clusters on Azure was in a repo called ACS Engine. And basically, that code base had code for Swarm, what people refer to as Swarm Legacy, Swarm Mode, DCOS, and Kubernetes all in one code base. And so in order to make it easier to vendor into the AKS service, they basically split that apart and continued a new code base called AKS Engine. And so I'm recommending that people use that for the Windows Kubernetes deployments because that's just where development's continuing there. And then all of the usage is exactly the same. It's just a different named binary. So the stuff that we're working on with Adelina will probably move over to AKS Engine sometime early next year. But if you're setting up your own clusters, that's the one we recommend using right now.
Sounds good. There was one person on the forum today that had some trouble setting up some clusters. So I guess, I think we need to do that. When we finish up the draft, and we'll have instructions on how to install and how to use, we need to actually pull all this together. And my bad for not doing it earlier. And basically pin it on the channel and tell people, hey, if you're using Google Cloud, for example, look at the directions that we have. If you're using Rancher, they have their own public port directions. And if you're using ACS Engine, here's where you find things. And they also have the Ansible scripts that Aline also created for OV and OVS. So we need to do that. I'll try to pull that in. Okay, I think that's all I had for today. Patrick or anybody else, anything else they want to bring up?
I can give a quick update on the GMSC side of things. So got a little bit of chance to sync up with Patrick during KubeCon, and also spoke to the SIG auth guy, specifically the person from SIG Identity, Mike Dines. So he was already aware of the GMSC CAP that Patrick had initially submitted. So, kind of just had a chat with him saying, this is what our overall goal is. We want this supported. So he brought up some concerns around any potential privilege escalations that it might cause. So he said that's sort of his main concern. And he wanted us to kind of get it cleared off through SIG node first because of the CRI changes that are needed in order to copy in the CRED spec. So he wanted that review sort of cleared out of the way before SIG really starts taking a look at it and iterating. So the plan with Jeremy is, so this is, I guess, this is a question I had. Like, we are wondering, like, where should we submit the KEP? Like, should it be under SIG Windows or should it go under SIG Auth as Patrick, I think, originally did?
I think the KEB, doesn't matter where it gets submitted, as long as you actually list all the other SIGs that need to actually put their stamp of approval on it. So you can put it under SIG Windows since we're driving it, but SIG Auth and SIG Node definitely are approvers along with SIG Release.
Correct. So the SIG Windows directory doesn't exist yet. Can you create it, Mike, for us under community?
You could just create it as part of the PR.
Yeah,
it
will auto-generate it on the first PR. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll probably have one more engineer from Docker joining in, so into SIG Windows. So he'll be helping out as well. That's all the update I had.
That's awesome. Thank you, Deep.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Anybody else? We're gonna finish right on time today. Look at that record. All right, thank you all. Have a great Christmas and holiday season. We'll see you guys in a few weeks, since we're gonna have to skip to continuous Tuesdays, and enjoy some time off if you guys have it, and we'll update all of you guys on our efforts in a few weeks. Bye.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.